Every model you create in SIMCA starts with a workset definition. This is where you select what you want to do and which variables and observations to analyze, what type of scaling to use, and if you need to apply transformations to your variables. It is therefore very important that this step in the analysis has a good workflow, and this is needed for both new and experienced users. In SIMCA 16, we have converted the old workset dialog into a wizard that leads you through the setup of the workset so you can spend more time looking at the final model instead of struggling with the setup. You start the wizard in the same way as before by clicking on the New Workset button to initiate a new model. In the upper part of the Workset wizard, you now see a progress bar that always starts with a start page and ends with a finish page. But in between, you see the steps that you will need to go through. These steps are defined by the modeling objective. And to begin with, they are all the same steps, but they are customizable. So if you want to include scaling when you do an overview model, you can add it for that objective. But we'll use the standard wizard. On the start page of the wizard, you select the modeling objective, and all objectives are shortly described on the quick info section to the right. The selection you make here is important because it will influence which buttons are active in the different steps and also which models you are able to select on the finish page. However, you can always go back to the start page and change objective. In fact, you can at any time click on any of the steps to go directly to it. We select the overview objective. The next step in the wizard, select data, will only appear if you have more than one dataset. And here you will see the list of all available datasets, and you can also change the order in which their content will be listed in the following steps by using the curved arrows. For instance, if you work with spectroscopy data, you may want to put the dataset with your concentrations before the spectral data so that your Y variables are listed first in the variable page. In this example, I will be using a process dataset with 570 observations and 18 variables, which is indicated next to the dataset name. On the variables page, we can see that we have 12 variables already defined as X, and we've got 6 variables defined as Y. This was done during the data import, but you can change the assignment at any time inside SIMCA. However, since I selected the modeling objective overview, there are no buttons to change between X and Y. If I instead had selected the objective regression, I would have had access to those. The only thing I need to decide for the overview objective is if the variables should be included or not. And the default is that all variables are included, which is okay for me in this demo. You also note now that we have a quick info pane integrated into the Workset wizard, providing you with a direct visualization of the data, one by one or multiple select. On the observation page, we need to define which observations should be excluded, since by default, all observations are included. And if you have more than one observation ID, you can add them by adding columns in this list. And instead of manually selecting the observations to exclude, you can use the Find Observation box and type in a search string and then decide on how to search for that string. There are also some predefined selections for observations, like making a random selection of observations. And at any point, you can also invert the selection, which sometimes is a very handy thing to do. In this demo, we want to analyze all observations, so we don't need to do anything here. We have now reached the last page of the wizard, where you get a short summary of your work set and you can decide what type of model you want to fit and how. The model type box contains a list of all available model types. Since I asked for an overview model, but I have both X and Y defined, I will be able to select between 3 different types of overview models: X, Y, or the combination. By default, SIMCA uses AutoFit, but you can change it into fit two first components or don't fit them at all. And this selection will then be your default the next time. If you're a more advanced user, you can also access modeling options like cross-validation groups and significant settings if you click the Model Options button now. As mentioned before, the objective controls the options available for the different steps in the wizard. So if I choose regression, on the variables page I will be able to set X and Y. If I choose class differences, I will be able to assign class belongings of the observations. If I select multi-block, I will be able to set the blocks the variables belong to. And if I choose hierarchical models, you can generate the base vectors directly in the wizard on the select data page, where I have access to all available models. So you can add the score vectors from model 1, and then you can continue with the wizard. Before we move on and to have a look at the Workset wizard for batch projects, a short word on trimming and winsorizing. To access the trimming functionality in the Workset wizard, we need to add the spreadsheet step. Go to Options, Add Spreadsheet, and then you can see that the integrated quick info has been complemented with a trimming and winsorizing section, where we can access all trimming functionality. Trim wins is described a bit more in the What's New Data Explorer video, but remember that trimming in the Workset wizard only affects the data used in this model. And the raw data, the data set, is intact, so no other models are affected by what you do here. Now let's have a look at how the Workset wizard adapts to a batch project. When working with a batch project, the wizard will have other objectives and steps than what we saw in the regular project. Here we have three types of modeling objective. We've got batch evolution, we've got batch level, and hierarchical batch level. And even if I can read the quick info text on each of these, the last two, the batch level and the hierarchical batch level, will not be available until I've fitted a batch evolution model. So let's start with a batch evolution. In this project, we only have one batch evolution dataset, so there is no need for the select data page that we saw earlier in the regular project. Instead, we go directly to the variables page. By default, all variables are included in all phases, but you can control this using the Set Phase button to the right. And the treatment of the Y variable is controlled by the little drop-down box on the Y button. The next step is to select which batches to include in the model, and by default, all are included. To exclude or include batches or phases, you use the two buttons found below the list that you want to modify. We keep all batches and all phases. And we choose the OPLS class model, and we use AutoFit, and we click Finish. We now also see that we have a multiplot for the summary of fit. Let's create a batch level model. In previous versions of SIMCA, you now had to go to the Batch tab to define your batch level data. In SIMCA 16, the Batch tab has been removed, and instead you go directly to the Workset wizard. So I click New, and I choose Batch Level. And since we have not created any batch level data, we do so in the wizard on the Select Data step. We go with raw data, all variables, and now we've created the batch level data set, and we can continue selecting the variables, batches, and then we are on the finish page. I'll fit two components to the PC model. Before we end this video, I also want to point out the trimming functionality for batch evolution models. So I select the batch evolution, and when you want to perform trimming in an evolution model, you first need to add the spreadsheet step to that objective. So we add the spreadsheet, and then we can go here And as mentioned before, the trim wins is described more in the What's New Data Explorer video, but it's good to know that you can also perform trimming on individual phases here in the Workset dialog. When you perform trimming on a workset, regular or batch doesn't matter. You need also to decide on whether you want to apply the same trimming criteria when using the model for predictions. By default, the prediction data will not be trimmed, but on the finish page, you can control this. Using Workset trimming criteria on predictions is one of the model options you can set in the model options dialog. So if I check this and click OK, then I will apply the same trimming rules on my predictions. And the choice you make here will also be transferred over to SIMCA Online. This concludes the introduction of the Workset wizard. Hope you find this addition to SIMCA 16 useful, and keep your eyes open for more videos in the feed on the start page of SIMCA, or search for Sartorius Stedium Data Analytics on YouTube. Thanks for watching.